right, everybody, welcome back to Bold Parenting. My name is Silas.
And I'm Aaron.
And I'm Zane.
And welcome back to Bold Parenting.
The real name.
Bold Parenting.
Until Silas changes it again.
I don't think we're going to change
Bold
it again
Parenting.
for a long time.
I like the name.
It's good.
What are we talking about today?
The comment section where somebody I got the best comment.
We were reading comments from
Which
our
are
YouTube.
amazing.
And we appreciate you out there, loyal supporters. We always say comment, and some people take that to mean comment anything. And so Dad's comment this week was...
You should just read it.
this sound. Okay, I'll get it real quick.
Because you'll forget what it is. So I actually appreciate, because it's fun. It makes me laugh. And I want criticism. Well, if it's constructive criticism, not just, well, it can be fun criticism too.
Not like you're ugly, because you can't change that.
That's not there's a difference between criticism and truth.
True.
Gotcha.
So anyways,
I just dissed myself because
Silas was doing the weekly update on all our stuff, and he said, best comments ever.
So every week we go through what shorts have done well and who has the funniest comments. And there's a short of Dad explaining the theory that you should not let your kid be different because don't treat your kid as the exception. Like the rules apply to everybody. And the top comment is, there's a good chance this guy talking is a fool. It sounds a lot like he's saying clip their wings because birds don't fly here. And I think that could be your new catchphrase.
Clip their wings.
Clip your wings, kid. Birds don't fly here.
Actually,
tell that to Droopy.
I want my kids to fly. I really do. Because the sooner they leave the house, right, quiet. So you want them to fly.
Good. Now you're not only a fool, you're also selfish. I want my kids to leave because I want to be alone.
I really don't. Well, I kind of do, actually. That's kind of why you raise them.
To get rid of them?
No, to be independent.
I hear to get rid of them.
No, that's true. Though.
No, if you know my father, Dad's best line, whenever we go anywhere, he says this every time. We're all loading up, and he gets impatient as he does.
Never.
As Mom does all the planning, all the packing, all the loading, and then Dad comes out of the room like, why haven't we left yet? Your number one comment is, guys, come on, we got to go so we can get back.
Oh, that's actually true.
We got to do this so we can be back here.
I don't say that about vacation stuff. That's a lie.
I didn't say vacation. I just said go anywhere.
That's true.
Church,
nighttime
outings, date night.
Let's go so we can get back.
Yeah.
That's true. I like home. Because you guys are there.
Home is where the heart is.
That's right. In my heart. There's a song about that. And my heart is down in.
A lot of people say home is wherever you are. And Dad's like, home wherever my books are and my chair.
True. Yeah.
My kids, they can come and go.
They do.
Chairs are forever.
That's right.
Cheers.
On that note, bold parenting.
Speaking of children, bold parenting. Today, we are talking about faithfully parenting an unbelieving child. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, it happens a lot. I think it's a pretty sensitive topic because if you're a Christian couple, that should be like your greatest hope is that all of your kids grow up and walk with the Lord. But in our ministry at Future Men, we've interacted with a lot of families that struggle with this very thing because they have a teenager that is starting to rebel, and part of that rebellion is rejecting God and rejecting the Christian faith that they were brought up in. We want to start that conversation today. This is a huge topic, and so we probably won't cover everything. But
right.
So Aaron, let's just start by talking about how you raised your kids, because I think some families approach raising their kids in a Christian home like you are a Christian as you grow up. I'm going to treat you as a Christian until you're not. Other families are like, no, you're not a Christian. We're going to make sure you understand that until you make a confession of faith, you're not a Christian. What was your approach, and why did you guys go with that?
Yeah, so this is this could be controversial, which is good because it just means you're thinking. Hopefully, I won't be, a fool who just try to clip my kids' Christian wings.
Birds don't fly here, Dad. Come on.
But for real, it's definitely you got to think about it because you're going to do it. You're going to respond, and you're going to sort of put them into a little box one way or the other. Because when you're parenting, you're responding to everything they do. You're as a father, as the leader, right? You're doing family worship. You're setting up some type of curriculum in your home if you're homeschooling, or you're figuring out where they're going to go to school. So all these things are guiding them in a direction. So I guess default mode would be you're doing nothing. You're just not thinking. You're just responding, which a lot of parents actually do, which is not good. But if you're seriously planning, like some of the men that have worked for me in the past or currently, friends that I've had at church, you watch how they respond to their kids in worship, volunteering to pray, taking communion. There's lots of things where this all of a sudden hits home. Like, well, how are you responding? So
when you say hits home, you mean you're forced to sort of say one way or the other.
Yeah, you're gonna act. There is no again. The default mode is you don't even think about it. You just respond as it's happening. So let's take something like communion. That's a pretty easy one because there isn't you don't have to fill out a request to do communion at your church. It just comes around and you take it or you don't. And if you got a child sitting there and they're 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6, whatever, they're going to want communion just because it's something to do and it's food, sort of. I mean, it's not much, but it's like they're thinking, oh, this is kind of cool.
Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. So you're going to make some kind of you don't take it yet, you'll explain it later, or you won't explain it, you'll just forget about it when you get in the car, or you'll let them take it because you don't want to deal with the hassle of them not taking it. But both those are sort of just responding rather than we've sat down as a husband and wife and we have a direction we're going, and there's a reason for it. So Zane asked, so what have we done? In some ways, it's irrelevant what we've done, other than I'll explain sort of why we've done it to help you guys who are listening figure out, well, how am I going to do it? And I have this conversation a lot with people because we do the parenting class, and typically there's young families in there, and they haven't thought about it, or they're in the middle of just responding at church, trying to keep it away from their kid, or just giving it to them so they don't have to deal with it. I would say just figure out which side you're going to stand on and why, and then stand there. So for us, I've chosen we treat them as believers until they profess otherwise, and I'll give a weird story if it fits right now. I think it kind of does. So I had a family at Future Men. They were coming over to the house to visit at one of our summer breaks. We were sitting in the living room of the Future Men home, and the boy was he was a pretty good kid as far as his behavior at Future Men. He had been involved up in their hometown with youth group, going to church his whole life, but he would go to youth group and then leave. Right, the parents would drop him off and then leave because it wasn't a Sunday afternoon or whatever. It was a different night of the week. He'd go do stuff in town, or he'd walk around, even around the church building. But he just wouldn't be in the youth group. And he started to do rebellious things, listening to music that wasn't pleasing to the family, dressing in black, a lot of stuff that was just they weren't happy with.
Aren't you in black?
I am.
Oh, okay.
In honor of this kid. So
okay, cool.
If you're listening, kid. I know your name, but I'm going to say your first name is Josh. We've had about 100 Joshes, so it doesn't matter. Literally about 100 Joshes.
I know your name, but I'm not going to say it. Anyway, Josh.
But this kid was like, we're sitting in the living room, and he basically made the statement something to the effect of, well, I'm not a Christian. And his mom was just freaking out. Like, yes, you are. I remember when you prayed the prayer when you were 4 years old in your bedroom. You were on your knees. I can see it. And I was sitting there in my own little head thinking, okay, this is rough because she's probably heard something like this before, him denying the faith at home in some manner, but she doesn't want to accept it because it's you don't want to think, oh, my child is rejecting the faith, because the ramifications of that are enormous. But reality is, if he's thinking that, if he's saying that, it's probably true, or at least he's at that crossroads of trying to figure it out. But rather than dealing with where he was at, she was just cramming down his throat. No, this is who you are.
Yeah.
So when they're growing up and when they're little, I think we all sort of do that in terms of we're praying and they're closing their eyes, they're holding our hands or whatever. They're praying with us, right? So, we're treating them like Christians, but when they profess otherwise, I think continue to do so, not in a questioning way. You can have good conversations about it, but in a, yes, you are because I remember, is sort of like, I think it's damning to them in the sense of you're giving them a false security. And I know there's a lot of this is another, podcast topic, honestly, eternal security, is salvation, lose, say it once and you're in, or is it like live it out, until you die or you're out. I mean, these are theological stances. We'll stick with just when you're raising them up because there's too much for one podcast. So when they prayed, we'd let them pray. We're assuming that when we're talking to them and praying, they're a believer, right? Their voices are going to heaven. I remember meaning they're reaching God's ears. I remember Meryl one time. This is one of my daughters. This is like probably one of the most poignant memories for me. We were going through a lot with the county, trying to get future men to be licensed by the county or whatever. She was in her room praying. I just kind of either heard her or she made me a little note or something. But it was very much like, obviously she was, storming the gates of heaven, so to speak, presenting her case before God as to why she wanted this. And I've thought ever since that day, oh my goodness, we minimize the prayers of kids in the sense of, if they're really God's child or in a process of becoming God's child, right? He listens to her prayers as much as he does mine. More, I would say, because she's praying in faith and blind faith because she's just a kid. But it meant a lot to me. And she actually drew this picture of it. It was pretty cool. But again, I treat her prayers like, I didn't say, you haven't made a profession of faith yet, and you haven't even been baptized, so I don't really want you to pray like this because it doesn't mean anything.
Birds don't fly here.
Yeah, that would be horrible. And now, and it's like, okay, somebody could say, yeah, but you're giving them false assurance. But all our kids have come to a point where they have professed faith, right? Some of my current really young ones, like Angus and Finn, I haven't necessarily heard their story. I know it sounds weird, but like they've made a profession of faith, they've been baptized, but at some point their stories really come out, like in devotions or like I share time at Christmas. A lot of times you'll hear the real time they became a believer. And it's interesting, but we've always just said, treat them like believers until they profess otherwise. And so far, we've been blessed. Our kids haven't professed otherwise. Some of their actions at times make you wonder, right? Do you see fruit? Like we have a family right now at Future Men. The mom's like, I don't think any of my kids are believers. And she's basing it on their behavior and their fruit, which makes sense. That's fine. But again, I don't know that I would be telling them, well, you're an unbeliever. There's so much confusion there. And when you think about the children of Israel, and this is what I go back to. So this is sort of like you could make this a little short, maybe, I don't know. But like when the children of Israel were practicing for, or I don't know if it's practicing is the right word, the Last Supper, right? So go way back. It's not even called the Last Supper at this point. It's called what?
The Passover.
So God's setting up the Passover with Moses and saying, okay, here's what you're going to do tonight. Right? You're going to paint the stuff over the door. You're going to have this certain food, which is really tasty. You're going to love it. You're going to do all these things. It's a protocol for this will protect your family tonight from death.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a pretty serious deal. Many people died that night, right? Many of the Egyptians and the animals. And it was a horrific night. But if they followed this thing, they would be protected. Well, it's funny because it wasn't like, now if your kid says he's all in, he's a Jewish person, he's of Jewish lineage, he wants to do this, he's in. He just had to eat the food, right? You're sitting there and it's assumed he's part of that family until they profess otherwise. And I know that that's not necessarily salvation. And I don't care if you comment below and just say why this is crazy, doctrine. But it's like they were part of it. And it became a celebration, right? Passover became a celebration where everybody in the family did it. Now, granted, I know there were people at the Passover celebrations who it was probably, they were miles away in their heart. They could be in the middle of some horrific sin pattern. I get that. But again, we're talking about in general, how are you raising your kids? So for us, even like with communion, and I know this is going to get comments, but it's like, well, I might as well be honest. With communion, when they could verbalize to us a love of Jesus, right? They were praying. In family worship, they were, in devotions and in their chores. I mean, their life is showing us, they're doing the right thing in the sense of they're living the Christian life. And we're big on when there is an incident, a sin incident, a brother hits his sister or does something, we're talking little kids still. They lie or they steal something. We deal with it right then and there. So even if the next day was Sunday, in theory, we've already dealt with it. They've asked for forgiveness. We've all moved on. So I wouldn't stop them from communion that day. If there was an unresolved issue, we talked about this as the kids get older in discipleship. If there's something in your life that's a continuous sin, yeah, that's something you want to address before you just randomly take the Lord's Supper. And it's like you're not honoring the intent there. You're remembering the Lord's death until he comes, right? Which means you're thinking he died on the cross for the sin that I'm not confessing and changing. So this is a lot of stuff. But we raised them as, if they're professing believers, treat them like believers. So just like Passover, our kids even took communion, not as babies. I'm not talking about pedo communion or pedo baptism. I don't necessarily go into that camp. I know many people do, and comment below if you do and tell me why you do. That's fine. But treat them like believers.
So I have two kind of questions to follow up with that. So first, well, this is just an observation because you mentioned the Israelites, and I think it's also interesting because whenever God was giving them laws throughout Exodus and Numbers and,
Deuteronomy and Joshua.
Yeah, those. Deuteronomy mainly. He would always say, it always notes in there, like he addresses the Israelites and then he says like, and the sojourner among you. And he always mentions like the people traveling with them are held to the same standard and the same sacrifices and everything else. So I think that's important because it's almost like you're treating them the same way. Sort of like what you said about the kids, but these aren't even kids at this point. These are just people traveling with them. And when... cut that out because I had to like think through that. There's a thought pattern here of, so if you have let's say a 10-year-old who is a believer and a 12-year-old who isn't, does the standard of the parents ever change with those kids?
Does he say, is he a professing unbeliever? Like,
yeah, which is a little bit unrealistic for a 12-year-old, but
I think so too. I think they're going to lie just because there's less pressure.
But let's say he doesn't, or let's say he's 15.
Right. Well, yeah. So we get the young men at Future Men to do that, and my thing is just it changes nothing. Now, granted, I'm not going to a good example of this is at our church. I'm one of the elders, so we also do communion. I know, pretty important. So we're handing out the communion, and I always choose to stand in the front. Because the elders all line up and gives us the stuff, right? And then we go hand it out. I always stand where I want to go give it to the Future Men boys because I want to watch and see, okay, who's taking communion, right? Because it means something to me. I'm like, okay, you're taking communion, but during the week, what do you profess?
Yeah.
Right. And I won't I'm not there to like judge them on it. I'm just going to ask them later. Like, hey, tell me why. Why did you not take it? Like, I see a boy he's one of the best kids at Future Men behaviorally, but he's like, he's cognizant enough that it means something. He doesn't take it because right now he's saying, I don't see fruit in my life. I might not be a believer. I don't know if I'm in. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you need to be thinking about this. You need to be wrestling with this and either commit, get in or get out. And it's like he's in that process of thinking. And then with our kids, we get in that process of thinking. So, yeah, a 12-year-old that's like, I don't think I'm a Christian. And maybe he says that because he wants to do something that you're saying Christians don't do that. Like, maybe he wants to be part of a school group, or maybe he wants to, like, listen to certain types of music or whatever it is that he's wanting that goes against what you've taught him.
Yeah.
Now, again, probably not at 12. He could be. But usually that's like 15, 16. So this is more realistic. If you're listening, just adjust it to who your kid is. But you can't change the standard. It's like, well, I hear you, bud, but we are a Christian home, meaning we're mom and dad are doing our best to like honor God and be faithful to you guys. So the bar doesn't change. Same requirements for asking for forgiveness. Same devotional times. I would actually use them not as what does the unbeliever think? You don't do that in your family. But like I do this all the time in worldview class.
Hey, what would the heathen group say about this?
But it's fun. It's like because I want to know what they're thinking. I want to pick their brain a little bit. And when the walls are broken down, now it's easy for me because at Future Men they're not my kids.
Yeah. So
I'm not like sitting there like a parent would, because your heart's breaking, man. If he's saying this, and I get that, and I love these kids, so I'm not happy about it. But when they're a professing unbeliever, I'm always asking them questions during worldview. I'll say, okay, from your perspective, what do you think? Like if we're talking about like music's evil effect on, the way you live, they'll be honest. They'll say it because they're not like, they don't feel condescended to. They don't feel like, oh, you don't have an opinion because you don't agree with me. It's like, no, I want to hear your opinion.
And it's not personal anymore, which is like they're not your kids, so it's not personal for you, and you're not their dad, so it's not really personal for them. They can just,
That's
they don't take it that way.
But I think if you approach even your own kids as much as you can the same way, you get better traction because in a weird sense, they're kind of not your kids anyway. And we say this, we dedicate them to the Lord, or they belong to God, or their salvation is in His hands. But then when it plays out in reality, we don't act that way. And I understand why. And you don't have to comment below. It's like, I get it. I'm the same way. I mean, we want our kids so badly to be faithful, following, obedient, right? All those things because it makes our life. I mean, this sounds really selfish, but I think it's how most of us live. It makes our life easier. It's better. And obviously, I want my kids in heaven. I get that, and the faith is real. I'm just trying to be as honest as I can because this is how it plays out. And you're listening to the podcast, and I hope you're thinking, I really want to I want this stuff not just be platitudes. I want it to be real.
So we're gonna jump into some more of the biblical foundation for this. But before we do, I have one more question. Where are we at on time? Okay, we're doing good. What do you do? What do you say to the parents? So essentially, what you're proposing when you treat a kid as a believer until professing otherwise, meaning you're teaching them the same things, you're treating them the same way, you're showing them the same things. How would you respond to somebody who asks you, well, isn't that just brainwashing your kid?
Yeah. It is. Versus what? Versus not brainwashing them?
Yeah.
It's like, so yeah, it is. But it's weird. It's like, but you're not foolish about it. You're not like deceiving yourselves or them. So you've got here's something I do. Parents will ask, what's the success rate of future men, right? And it's like, and this podcast isn't about that.
Oh, it's 100%, by the way.
That's
if
right,
you're
it
thinking
is.
about it, it's 100%.
Comment below if you disagree.
We just have a we just have an interesting definition of success.
Well, I'm honest about it. Here's my big thing is this. So if your kid, like we're like when the parents, we have weekly phone calls for counseling the parents and helping them understand where their kid's at. And we're extremely honest with, here's where they're at in the level system. Maybe they're doing fantastic because they're willing to obey. And I'll say it's not out of a love of righteousness. It's I don't want consequences.
Yeah.
Right. So in your home, you got to be thinking the same idea. You got to be thinking, okay, what are they willing to give me? These boys are pragmatic obeyers, right? They're little like, I don't want consequences. I'll obey. It's easier. And I tell them, awesome. If you're obeying me, that means you can obey mom and dad. If you can obey mom and dad, go home. Who wants to live here? And granted, I love what we do, but it's like the goal is to get the kid home. So if your son is like sitting there and you guys are fighting because he has a different worldview, why are you surprised he has a different worldview?
Yeah.
He just told you. Most kids just hide it or they're just not sure. If he told you, you got to almost have a better ear for a conversation. So again, you keep discipling them. You keep having them in family worship, but you treat them with the respect of, okay, he's a professing unbeliever right now, but he's pragmatically willing to listen. I can still pour into him. I've told parents, you've got like this weird, and this is not a guilt trip, but sometimes I feel it like a guilt trip. You have 18 years of like seminary at your house. When they leave your house and they can't even explain how to become a Christian, or they can't explain what is sanctification, you're not doing your job. And it's like 18 years. Now, granted, the first, let's say 4 is just getting them to learn to, sit still. And there's many days missed because of sicknesses and all this stuff. So if you add it up, let's say you have 15 years or 12 years, 10 years. That's a lot of time. Right? That's a lot of time for you to live the faith in front of them. Right? Like Deuteronomy 6 is a verse a lot of parents like to go to for when we walk in the way, when we lie down, when we rise up, when we eat, this is when we live our faith. And I'm like, yep, 100%. But the first part of that verse says, if it's not in your heart, it says, this that is in your heart, you're going to put it in the heart of your children. And it's like, well, that means it has to be in your heart first.
Yeah.
So you're living it and then preparing every day to teach something to them. Like in our devotions right now, don't judge me. We're watching The Chosen, and I know it's made by Mormons, and I know all this great stuff. And it's like, well, actually, feel free to judge me. But we're watching it, and we stop it like all the time. And so you'll watch 5-6 minutes of it, and then we stop and say, okay, let's evaluate this. And Grandma's in the room with us.
I was going to say, Grandma loves The Chosen.
Well,
Jesus has long hair.
Grandma's awesome. But Grandma said something, and she's astute because she's kind of losing her mind. And it's interesting because she's like, she doesn't want to be confused.
Yeah.
So I've got to be really careful on the books I give her because I used to give her fun, theological, hard things to understand and twists a little bit. And she enjoyed the challenge because her husband never did. He just said, this is what you believe. So it's kind of fun, but it's but now I'm like, okay, I have to be careful with her because she really is she doesn't want to be scared. She doesn't want to be confused. But we'll stop it and she'll say, but this puts a picture in my mind. I don't know if it's the right picture. I'm like, you're 100% correct. But my response is there's already a picture in your mind, or you're just not thinking about it. So with our kids, it's the same thing. They're already envisioning what heaven's going to look like, or what lying in the face of God looks like, or how do my prayers get to God's, ears, right? They're thinking something. You talking about it doesn't in your uncertainty, doesn't all of a sudden now make them at risk for they're going to walk away from the faith. Zane, you have it down here, a verse about being faithful.
Yeah.
Right. So what is that verse, and what does that verse mean as far as even how you respond to future men? Because you don't have your own children yet, but it's but you have 20 every day.
Yeah. Well, I think what I was talking about I think you're talking about Romans 14. Is that what you're talking about?
Maybe there's a lot of them. I'm thinking of the one that I think it's in Galatians where it says, "Moreover is required in the steward that a man be found faithful." And I always say it doesn't say successful; it says faithful.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's huge because you're not going to be always successful. Mm-hmm. It just sucks with your kid. You just feel like the dagger in the heart, right? But
and I think that's the biggest issue with most parents is it's personal when it becomes about your child's salvation, but it's also personal because you're the one raising them and you're the one, like you said, pouring into them. And when they reject that, it feels like, oh, man, like what have I done wrong almost?
Yep.
So I think what you have to remember is your child is their own person. They have their own soul, and they're going to have to give an account for their soul before the Lord one day. And just like you did, and just like you had to make your own choices, and you still do. So the Romans verse I was talking about is
14:12.
it's right here. It's 14:12, and it's so then each of us will have to give an account to himself before God, and
that's a chapter on Christian liberty,
yeah,
or a section on Christian liberty, which means the gray areas, including how you parent.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So I think the encouragement is, like you said, don't measure your success as a parent by did all my kids become Christians? I mean, you would feel pretty successful if that happened, but by your faithfulness. Did I, did I share the gospel with them as often as I could? Did I demonstrate what it looks like to be a Christian every time that I could, or,
So here's the, I really want to make sure parents are hearing this right, because we want to be, man, we don't want to send a false message. Their salvation or lack of it is not you. If you have a kid who's being in love with the Lord, you watch them reading the Word, and you look at their Bible and it's full of notes, it's just like your heart swells because, wow, my kid's got it. That's not because of you. You probably do contribute to it, which is fantastic, but it's like it's God stirring in them, right? It's the Holy Spirit living in them, and it's like the same with the opposite kid. If you're faithful, he could be like just drawn to his flesh. But for you, right, again, don't change the standard. They still do devotions. They still have their chores. They still, like, the hard part is a lot of kids are rejecting because they just want, they want the freedom to do what they want. The kid Josh I was talking about, man, he was just tired of living his life his parents' way. So I used to talk to him about, like, Future Men, because he was living there. And I said, does Future Men have more rules or less rules at home? He's like, oh, well, way more. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. And it's like, is your life more chaotic or less chaotic being here? And he's like, well, less, because I never argue, and it's more peaceful. I'm like, why? It's like your parents love you more. They have a vested interest in you. But I think the difference is he feels like we don't own it, in the sense of we can't force a kid to, like, believe or want to do the right things. We're still expecting them to do the right things. He wasn't sneaking out of youth group there. He wasn't, vaping with his buddies there. He was, back then it was smoking cigarettes. He wasn't doing any of the things his parents wouldn't allow. And then even more at Future Men. More rules. Bed earlier, right? More chores. And he was happy. And it's like, part of that is, like, I know parents, or kids do want to please parents to a certain point, and that puts a weird pressure in them. But I think a lot of it is just we're wanting them to say what we want them to say. And I'm like, you got to kind of get over that. They might not for a while. There might be seasons of where, if you really want them to open up, you're going to hear things you don't like. Be okay with it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so to wrap,
you're not talking about science. This is really rare.
I know. Are you guys enjoying it?
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah. You have a lot to say on this episode. It's all
in
good.
all honesty, as you're hearing this, you grew up.
You're giving me the hand.
I am.
Can
man.
we get a
It's
zoom
like,
in on Dad's hand towards me right now? It's kind of intimidating.
Well, just say.
In all honesty, say the right thing or I'll hurt you.
Dad, you're full of baloney, because here's what we did, right? Or
no,
are you trying to own how you and Jules are doing it?
No, I think you treated us as believers till we professed otherwise, which thankfully we didn't. And I think that's the way we would do it, mainly because, like God says, another guy, very wise man, Dr. Philip Rack, if you're listening, which you're probably not, but if you hear this, text me. We were sharing our testimonies once, and he said, and we would kind of laugh because we're like, yeah, well, when I was a kid, I thought I was a Christian, but then I really wasn't.
Yeah.
And what we meant was sort of, I thought I was a Christian, but then I got to college and realized I sort of have to own this for myself. It's not just, I'm not inundated by it anymore, even though at college we kind of were.
But you're choosing it.
But he told us, he's like, your temptation there is to think, well, I wasn't a Christian because I hadn't professed it. He's like, but remember that like God doesn't come into your heart necessarily during that like sinner's prayer. It could be before then, it could be after then. And he said, like, what did Jesus say? He said, like, a childlike faith is to be like valued and to be treasured. And I think that counts for a lot. And I think it's a lot more than we kind of give it credit for. Like when you said, which I think is right, that God hears, that little girl's prayers just as much, if not more than mine, because she's believing. It's like the widow's mites in some aspects. Like that's all she has, and she's giving it all. And so I think that counts for a lot, and I don't think we necessarily give that enough credit. And where I was going with the whole brainwashing thing is that came off of, I saw this dumb Instagram reel, I should have saved it, of this mom saying how she starts every day praying with her kids before breakfast and then playing worship music during breakfast.
Sounds like your wife.
And the comments were all like, man, it must be crazy teaching your kids to believe in, quote, Santa before they're even like 5. Yeah. And all just destroying her for essentially what they were saying, her brainwashing her kids into believing a fantasy. And I thought that was interesting because we all teach our kids something. Yep. And the alternative is what? Like you tell a 4-year-old to choose for themselves. Or Cocomelon. Yeah, you just... well, exactly. So I have this good quote from a...
furry out there.
This is a parenting Comment expert. Below. Zane, Dad, don't say anything. Zane, I want you to tell me who said this.
Ooh. No.
He's presented with a contesting view on the way he's parenting his child. And the contesting view is you should let them choose for yourself.
For themselves.
And he said, no, I'm afraid it don't work that way. You can't let a youngin' decide for himself. He'll grab the first flashy things with shiny ribbons on it. Then when he finds out there's a hook in it, it's too late. Wrong ideas come packaged with so much glitter that it's hard to convince them that other things might be better in the long run. All a parent can really do is say, wait and trust me and try to keep temptation away.
Andy Griffith.
And Andy,
I didn't know who that was.
You didn't? I thought you would know for sure.
I love Andy Griffith.
Yeah,
I was an old OP.
Well, he's actually a bad parent.
He's actually a bad parent in a lot of episodes, so don't go to him for your parenting advice. But
come to us.
But I think that is the actual, it's one of those weird realities. It's sort of like when you say, when you have a kid that's less than 4, really all you're doing is behavior modification. Yep. Like they're just learning to sit and obey. And that sounds really harsh to say because like, no, they have a personality and a will and all this stuff. Like, yeah, but still, like they don't really reason yet. So really that's what you're doing. You can tell yourself otherwise, but good or bad, you're teaching them you're in charge or they're in charge. There's really 2 options.
Right.
And it's the same thing I think with those kids. But transition a little bit. So you have a kid, let's say we're the mom, which I think when you said, well, I'll touch on this one other thing really quick. And you said you watch the kids to see who takes communion, not so you can judge them or later when they mess up that week, we'll be like, oh, you took communion and now you're giving me this attitude. It's like, that's
a good idea.
That's not necessarily the point here.
That's not my desire, no.
Right, but your desire is, I thought that was interesting because that's just a great example of what we preach to future men, which is just life-on-life discipleship, where you're with them enough to see their actions and then ask them about them and hold them accountable later in the week. And I think that's just a good example of discipleship. So I just wanted to point that out to parents. That's another great opportunity. And if you're doing discipleship with your kid weekly, where you're having these conversations, I would hope and pray that you're not going to end up in the situation where you brought up that mom that's like, no, you're definitely a Christian. I know you are.
Right.
Unless your kid's just a chronic liar and has been lying to you for 10 years and you haven't caught on, which, can happen. But let's say you haven't done discipleship. You raise what you believe to be as a Christian, but you didn't know he was going away at youth group or not listening or doing whatever. Goes to college, comes home on spring break, and it's like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be honest. This isn't for me. I've kind of left the faith. How do you start to deal with that? We have about 10 minutes here. So let's talk about more college age out of the house. How do you be faithful in the face of that rather than, they're no longer under your authority? What shifts?
You want me to say it or give it some thoughts?
I don't know. Zane looks like he's stewing.
Well, I was going to, go ahead first. No, you're good.
Well, this happens in many different areas. If you have, we had 14 kids. So it's like, it's pretty cool because almost every situation comes up. So it's like, it's a good like testing ground. Mm-hmm. You're going to see things with problems in marriages. You're going to see things with like different worldview on like how they're raising their kids, right? You're going to see all kinds of stuff. And for me, the bottom line is, okay, again, I really don't clip their wings. Contrary to that comment, it's like I want them to be out. I mean, I've raised them to be independent.
Right.
However, I really, really want like open relationship. like when my kids leave home, it's like the ones who they're involved in discipleship in their hometown. They're pursuing, their Christian growth on their own, or they're not in the middle of let's call it like a life pattern it's kind of ruining them, like their marriage or like their work or whatever, right? It's like I want those phone calls every week, right? I'm still like trying to, as much as they'll allow me to help disciple them, right? I make myself available. I'll ask, hey, how you doing? Praying for you. And it's like you keep talking to them. So the kid that says, I'm not a believer, is like, oh, okay, cool. I'm glad you shared this with me. Keep talking about it. Why? Why do you say that? What makes you think that? And is it like do you feel like you're at this, hey, this is my new life, I'm on this road? Or is it like, I'm just like, I don't know where I'm at. Like the kids at Future Men always say, I'm on the fence. And I'm like, okay, well, the fence is basically the devil's territory still. But at least you're honest about, like, I'm not just going to say I'm a believer so you won't bug me.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have a conversation. I'd much rather start discipling them, even as an unbeliever.
Yeah. Do you guys know who Abby Johnson is, the anti-abortion activist? So they made that movie Unplanned about her and her life. But basically her testimony is that she went off to college. She grew up in a Christian home, went off to college, was radicalized by Planned Parenthood at one of their college fairs, and she ended up becoming an assistant to abortionists in Planned Parenthood clinics. And then what ended up like changing her whole perspective on it and bringing her back to the Lord ultimately was she got pregnant, and she was able to see her baby on the ultrasound, and then she thought she was having a miscarriage. And she got really like sad and like broken up about the fact that she thought she was losing the baby. And she called her mom whenever she thought the miscarriage was occurring. And her mom, who's like a strong Christian, is like listening to her. And then she just kind of gets quiet and she's like, Abby, I'm really confused as to why you're so sad, because like you don't believe that this is a baby, right? And then Abby's just like, I just like broke down, and like immediately all this stuff that like my mom and dad had like talked to me about, and like it had like pierced through to her heart.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like what you're talking about, when a parent is able to still be that voice in their life, even when they've like gone down like the wrong road. She still wanted to call her mom and talk to her about it. And her mom was still bold enough to share the truth with her. She wasn't like, oh, I don't want to share this in this hard moment because I don't want to push her further away. But she knew that the thing that she needed was the truth in that moment. And I think
in love, like the
in
Bible
love,
says, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was.
Yeah. And so if you know like how the world works, you know that your kids will run into these types of life situations where they're going to need the truth. And so for you to be able to maintain a relationship with them and be ready to share if they let you into that position, I think is a huge piece of that.
2 Timothy 2:24-26 says, And the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance, leading to a knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good verse describing almost that exact situation. And I think the mom in that instance did exactly what you're saying, which is such a good example of like real discipleship, where she had enough of a relationship with her daughter before this moment that she's obviously been speaking truth. They've obviously had this conversation. And her mom in that moment where you're talking to your daughter who's sad and brokenhearted isn't affirming of that necessarily. She's like, oh, I understand. Like, this must be so hard. But she sees it as her opportunity to be like, well, wait a minute. You say you don't even believe this is true. So why would this be sad to you? And not in a condemning, like, well, this is what you deserve. Like, you believed this. But in a way that's like, no, help me understand. Like, I thought you said this doesn't matter. And I think that is such a good example of what a good discipleship relationship looks like in that moment, where it wasn't overrun by emotions. They've already had the conversations before. And like you said, it's like the farmer that planted seeds and they sprung up much later. And what you always say, which is that don't think you're wasting your time doing all these memory verses and catechisms and songs, because they'll come to their mind later when and if it's the Holy Spirit's plan to like bring them back. And I think when you say it's not good, meaning your kid is following Christ, or bad, meaning they're professing not to, it's not the parent's responsibility to take ownership in that, but it is their responsibility to teach them the truth in love always. And so you're not responsible for your kid being a Christian, but you are responsible for your kid knowing what the truth is. And I think the mom in that instance, I forgot about that story, but that's perfect.
Yeah, it's a matter of were you faithful, right? Because we are held accountable for it. And it's like, and so is your kid, right? When they stand before Christ, it's like they're judged for what they've done, right, on their own. But we're also held accountable when it's our turn to be up there. So
yeah,
it matters.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the turning point for me and the ministry at Future Men. I really struggled my first 2 years because I kind of came in with this idea that, I was going to save them, or, at least that I was going to be able to see more fruit of our work during the time. And now, every time I have a conversation with a family for the first time, I always tell them, this was my perspective, but we really can't measure success by that, because ultimately we believe that it's the Holy Spirit that's going to do the work. We can be faithful, we can water the seeds that you've already planted, but ultimately we can't make any growth happen.
Yeah.
I think as a parent, that actually brings you a lot of peace whenever you might be banging your head against the wall with a really stubborn child.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, it's not you that's going to make them.
We woke up this morning like 7. Sorry, this is totally random. to
But
this
good.
banging. And I'm like, who is here so early? I was like, one of you guys is here to record.
It was me.
And it was Evelyn slamming her head against the wall.
Oh.
Just over and over. For
She's
fun.
probably lamenting just,
sin.
her sister's
sin. Probably.
As one last encouragement. And then I would say in the school, talking to people, or in the comment section, asking questions, this is I don't want this to be platitudes. And I know there's people out there who are 16, 17-year-old kids, or 15 even, right, that are like, but my kid's still going to do this afternoon. They're in my face about it. I think you have to get right to the bottom line with them. And we can help, what does that conversation look like? Or give me some examples of boundaries, or how do I define those lines for them? But when you say things like, you're going to obey someone. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, everybody has to obey someone, because you do. And if you're out there thinking, oh, you just use the word obedience, you're such a tyrant. It's like, well,
true.
Oh, but it's reality. They're going to obey someone. They're going to obey you, or they're going to obey the streets, right? If they're out there being homeless or whatever. And it's obedience to that means you're just trying to survive, right? You're doing what it takes to live that night in warmth or whatever, or get food, or you're going to obey the police. Or if people are using programs like Future Men, they're going to obey us. And I always tell them, we're not the end of the road, dude. This is a nice resting spot for your parents have chosen to help you, but you're going to obey the laws here, the rules here, or you're not. And if you don't, that's okay. You won't stay here, right? You will find a home somewhere else, because we're going to be faithful to this. We're not just going to house you and let you do, be self-destructive. Because the Bible says that's being a willing party to your son's death. I wouldn't, man, as rough as that verse is, I would almost put that on your mirror for a couple of weeks. If you've been in the habit of just letting it go because it's not worth the controversy. And I'm not saying create controversy. I'm saying learn to choose your battles and how to speak in those battles, so the kids understand mom and dad are just saying, I have to do X, Y, and Z in order to live here in peace. They're not saying you have to agree with me. They're not saying, you have to love the Lord with all your heart. It's you can't force those things. But that's sort of how it comes across to the kids if we're not careful. And it's that's what we want, obviously, because when they're motivated by a love of Christ, your job's kind of done. It's easy. But man, there are seasons when it's just not. And the kid just has to know, hey, we still have a house to run. We still have dishes that need cleaned up. You're still part of this home. And to live here, you're going to have to do this. So ask questions or call in or whatever it takes if you're wanting some structure to that, because it just isn't making sense. And, we'll see if we can help you.
So what you're saying is join the school community.
Sure.
Oh, that's a good segue. Yeah. So if you're not in the school community yet, but you're listening to this, go join the school community, because we say this a lot, but we don't have all the answers. And the answers we do have aren't right in every situation. And we would be prideful to say that they are. Dad might say that they are sometimes.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. So go join the school community, mainly because we can get you in contact with a lot of other parents in similar situations. You can ask questions on my kid's doing this and I don't know how to deal with it, or you can also encourage other parents in similar situations if you've been through that before yourself. So join the school community. If you've listened this far and you've liked what you've heard, if you could share this episode and subscribe, that is super helpful for us. Leave a comment because it shows good engagement. Ask us any questions you want. You can ask them on the video. That's the easiest. You can also email them to questions@futurefamilies@gmail.com. That's wrong. That's the wrong address. What's our questions? Questions@futurefamiliesmedia.com. Sorry about that.
Pretty soon this will all be concrete.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it is now.
Probably not. Anyway, thank you. This is Bold Parenting, and I guess that's it.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.